We see. Great. Okay. So, hi everyone. Michael Hart will be talking to you about the road to useful robotics. This is going to be a slightly higher level talk than the others. You may or may not be relieved to hear. And I'm also here on behalf of D Robotics. So, more correctly, this talk might be called the road to more useful, intelligent robots. Because to claim that we don't already have useful robots is a bit silly, and we do already have some intelligence in robots. So I'm going to expand my talk title to that, although I don't think it's as snappy. So first, let's have a quick look at what I'm going to talk about. So I'll quickly introduce myself. Then I'm going to take you on a road from where we started, which is past and current robots with intelligence, through to the roadblocks we're currently experiencing, what's stopping us from making smarter robots, and then on to where the road leads. Not where the road ends, because I have no idea, but what might be happening in the nearer future. So I'll kick off with myself. I'll keep this very brief. I'm Michael. I make educational content about robotics. So I have a blog here with a link at the bottom there, and a YouTube channel where I post videos about robots. So if you're interested in anything in the talk or in about learning to be a robot engineer yourself, come and say hello. So the road so far, past and present intelligent robots. So a little context on this one. I don't think this is a globally agreed thing. This is how I see AI, the kind of cornerstones that we need to solve for robots to be useful as intelligent robots. So broadly, that breaks down into perception, where is the box? Planning, how do I reach the box? And manipulation, how do I move the box? Or more generally, perception, can I understand the world around me? Planning, how do I interact with that world in order to make my objective happen? And manipulation, how do I actually cause that effect to happen with the tools that I have available? So let's talk about the first mobile robot. And this was revolutionary. This was Shakey, so called because it shook like mad when it ran. And it was so new that they didn't even call it a robot when they were asking for funding for it. It was called an automaton. So what Shakey could do, it had some perception capabilities. It combined the latest in artificial intelligence at that time into a single mobile robot. For perception, it was able to recognize boxes and doorways, and it had a map of the doorways that it could pass through in order to navigate. Planning, it could plan a route through doors and between doors, and I specified doors because the way its software worked was by saying to get to this room, I need to go through this doorway, that doorway, this doorway. And it was also able to manipulate. It could shunt boxes around. So its tasks broadly broke down to move a box here, go to here, that kind of thing. So to show you this in action, I've got a video clip ready. Don't worry, I've sped it up so we won't be sat watching videos, but we can see Shakey moving the box around, going through a doorway, taking an instruction, and then it had some localization capabilities as well. So it could use its camera to take a picture of the corner of a room, find the border, and match it to where it thinks it is in order to reposition it. It also had some actions like going through a door, and it had task planning and breakdown. So from an initial state, it could figure out what actions it was possible to take, and then which path of those actions got to its solution state. So in 1966 this was groundbreaking at the time, and this was how a robot could plan actions. It could even, if a box blocked a door that it didn't expect, it could reroute. So very cool stuff for then, although obviously very slow because they didn't have great computing power at that point. So I'll take you through another couple of early robots. First is Freddy. This is to give you an idea of the progression of intelligence of robots over time. So Freddy, which was roughly 1973 rather than 66 for Shakey, and its task was to pick up pieces of toys from a pile and assemble them. So you could jumble up, I think it was a boat and a car or something. Those pieces were all jumbled together, and it could pick up those pieces and assemble them into the two structures that were there. So for perception, it could identify those pieces from a messy pile, which is not an easy task to do. For planning, it could figure out how to assemble them in a structure, and then for manipulation, it could pick them up and place them in the right place. At the time, this was extremely slow. It took about 16 hours to work, and that's mostly because of the computing power that was available at the time. So that's 1973. We're skipping ahead a bit now to 1999, so 26 years later. Don't do maths live, but I think I got that one right. This is Aibo, and this is the first entertainment type robot that hit the market. So the top right there is the earliest version of Aibo, and the bottom right is one of the more recent versions that you could get. And it was able to identify, it could perceive tones of voice from people rather than words. The later models could do words, but at this point, only tones of voice. And it could identify its toy pink ball there. It could also plan a movement to the toy, and it could manipulate by moving the toy around. And it did have a button so that a human could interact with it to give it praise. Maybe manipulation is a bit of a push there, but that's where I've included it as it's a physical interaction with the world. And then last example for now is Azimo. So 2005, about 6 years later, and you can see in the top right the progression of Azimo through the years, getting into a slowly lighter and smaller form factor as the compute power increased and the robot technology improved. Bottom right is what it looked like, and then its capabilities I found quite hard to pin down because it operated for a number of years and it kept getting updates over those years. So these might not all be accurate for 2005, but it was able to recognize moving objects. And as far as interacting with people, it was able to recognize postures, gestures, sounds that people made, including words, and people's faces. From that, it could plan movements, it could face the person talking, or if it was in a pre-mapped environment with stickers on the ground to help it locate itself, it could navigate that environment. And for manipulation, it was able to run, it was able to kick a football, it was able to pour drinks, among other actions. These are usually pre-planned routines that are built into the robot. So no general capability to be told to take an action it had never done before and figure out how to do it. To save you from an entire timeline of robots, I've gathered a few examples here. We can see the Mars rover that was controlled by sending a series of landmarks from an operator on Earth, and it then had to navigate between them. Roomba, I'm sure we're all aware of. Some of the emotional robots, so robots that were intended to trigger an emotional response from you or to show emotion in order to get you to interact with it more. And drones, robot arms, and so on. The tech has improved over time, and here is kind of how. So here's how I see the AI breakthroughs that from original Shakey up until today. In 1970 to 80, so it was 66, I think, Shakey was born. It combined control, perception, mapping, and planning all into one robot. Now, there is a good 34-year gap. That's mostly because of improvements in technology, but not a massive breakthrough. But 2014, roughly, is when we started to see deep learning appear in robots. So neural networks that could help with perception capabilities and reinforcement learning so that robots that wanted to stand up could do that. We've started to see things like robot dogs able to teach themselves how to get up using simulation training, although that's in my next section. And it could use reinforcement learning to figure out how to take those actions. So 2016 to 21, that's when we started to see simulations and edge AI. So for simulations, it meant that robots could develop in randomized environments and run, which was very repeatable. So instead of getting a robot set up and making it do something, you could just hit the reset button and make it work again in simulation, which was much more reliable in order to work with. We also had edge AI, so Intel Movidius type sticks that let us run deep models like neural networks on robots. So this is still relatively new. And then 2019 to 24, this is when we started to see natural language instruction from LLMs, and we started to see VLMs and VLAs, so visual language action models, allow full AI control of robots. And we had Jaifei's talk with Momo already, so we started to see some of the full AI control that's possible with a robot. I would call that cutting edge of what we can do with AI in robotics. Which leads me nicely onto the current state of AI in robotics. What's the state of the art? And for this, I've got a couple of clips. We've already seen Momo. As I said, I think that's a good demonstration. But first up, this was the Google's model operating. So these arms, excuse me, I clicked onwards when I was trying to remove the focus. So these robot arms are capable of a number of tasks like zipping a bag, dunking a ball in a hoop, even uh, moving around objects that it's never seen before, according to the folks that published the video. So let's see it in action. And this is sped up 2 times. So you can see that it's able to identify the fruits and sort them into particular containers, zip a Ziploc bag shut, do origami, and dunk the ball in the hoop. And you can see even with the sped up video that the arms are just slightly shaky. And then again, erasers or sorting erasers into containers. So when I saw this video, I was astounded. I think this was maybe last year, so 2024. Um, so we can see that an AI is able to control a robot to perform more advanced actions than we've seen before. Another example is from Helix, which is by Figure. These two robots were asked to identify groceries they'd never seen before and work together to put them away. Again, this is sped up 2 times, and you can see that even sped up 2 times is pretty slow. Not to take away from how impressive it is, this is amazing. They're able to perceive the groceries, perceive their environment, plan how to put the groceries away, including passing objects to one another to get their task complete, and manipulation, putting objects in a particular place. I'd like to see how it performs with a fridge that's full. Can it move objects around to make space? But I think that's a question for Figure rather than to talk about here. So those are what I would consider state of the art of AI in robots. So a bit of a summary of the 3 cornerstones of what we're able to do now. Sensor fusion, we have some ability to combine data from different sensors. So as Jofo was talking about combining depth with RGB, that's not something that's commonly done. It's not something we do a lot of. VLAs tend to work on video only. So being able to fuse sensors is something we are starting to do now. It's something we've done outside of AI for things like SLAM and mapping. So SLAM is similar to simultaneous localization and mapping. So we do have some sensor fusion, and we're making steps towards better sensor fusion. We have natural language input now, which is incredible, and this is very recent. So we can actually tell a robot, go to the kitchen, and it will figure out how to do that. And object detection and classification. For objects that it's seen before and objects that are similar to objects it's seen before in training data, robots can identify what those objects are and interact with them. For planning, we know that cars are pretty much getting to fully autonomous driving. We've seen behavior trees, which is a standard way to program robots to have particular routines and behaviors. We can see that robots have task breakdown, especially with LLMs. They're great at breaking tasks down, although we still have issues with hallucinations. Maybe LLMs don't understand how to break a task down. And then finally, reinforcement and imitation learning. We've seen steps with those as well, particularly with simulation helping. And in terms of manipulation, we are seeing some force-aware control. So the most up-to-date models are able to change the force they're using depending on the object that's being gripped. They have some tactile feedback that they can use, so some amount of feeling of what's there, although to my understanding, this is still very limited. Moving and gripping objects, so not just moving an object, but moving objects out of the way in order to access objects that the robot is interested in. We do have the ability to do that. There are models that support that. And monitoring the own end effector, the robot's own end effector. So am I gripping the object? Is it the right object in order to continue a motion? So if that's the state of the art, what's stopping us, or rather, what's slowing us down? What are the roadblocks that we're seeing? So I'm organizing these into 3 categories. We've got manipulators, so how the robots interact with the world and the tools they can use. Compute limits, that's a data center on the top and a development kit on the bottom, the RDK X5. And the point there, I'll say quickly, is that you can't fit a data center onto a mobile robot. So what can you do? What are the limits to the compute there? And AI capabilities. What are the actual capabilities of AI, regardless of whether they can run on a robot or not? So we'll start with manipulators. I talked about having some force-aware control. That's still limited. We're still working out what objects are, how fragile they are, how to work with objects that are complicated in some way and deformable. So folding up t-shirts is still a major challenge for robots at the moment. We also have some joint limitations. So robots tend to have bulky joints using motors, which kind of restricts what actions they're capable of. So even humanoid robots don't tend to walk very naturally because they've got big bulky joints compared to humans with lots of smaller muscles that can help correct and make motions smoother. And interactions with the environment, which is arguably AI planning, but I've got a picture of a drawer here. If you imagine a robot is trying to shut the drawer and it shuts it slightly to one side and the drawer wedges, does it understand how to manipulate the drawer in order to correct that? That is something that is slowing robots down an actual understanding of the environment. Uh, excuse me. Next is compute limits. So as I was saying, can you fit a data center onto a robot? You can't. You can get a connection from a robot to a data center, but that comes with its own drawbacks, such as operating outside of network coverage means you've lost all of your AI capability. So I've got three uh, the big, the medium, and the small of computes that you might use on a robot. Starting with the big, so this was very recently released, the NVIDIA Jetson Thor, and this is very powerful, also quite expensive, you might see on the bottom, but something like this I'd expect to be used in a humanoid or something that needs to behave very intelligently. We can see 2000 tops, 120 watt max. These are useful, but don't memorize them. I'll show them in a comparison table. I'm just showing them now so that you get an idea of the figures. The middle of the road, uh, this is a kind of mid-range gaming laptop or equivalent. So I just pulled a random laptop that looks pretty recent. It's the Acer Nitro 5. So you can see it's got 32 gig of RAM, it's got 194 tops and a 135-watt charger. So this is kind of the performance that we can get, and I would expect this to be in something like a autonomous delivery robot. So that's the kind of size and capabilities that I expect to see from that. And then the RDK X5. So this is a development kit, think roughly the size of a Raspberry Pi. It's got smaller amount of AI available, so 10 tops instead of the 200-ish of the laptop or the 2000 of the Thor, and it's got a smaller amount of RAM and a 25-watt power supply. But the thing is, a lot of robots are small. Like the one in the top right here, this is the Sirius dog. The RDK is embedded in its head, and there's no real room outside of that in the robot, and it needs to have some level of autonomous intelligence or autonomous actions via intelligence. So we can't do that with a Thor. We can't do that with a laptop. Development kits are what we have. So what can we run on a development kit that size? And before I start to answer that, this is the comparison slide. So you can see from the top end, 2000 tops, so that's uh, billion tera operations per second, which is not billion, I think it's trillion. Yeah, trillion operations per second. So the top is about 2000, the laptop is about 200, and the RDK is about 10. Um, you would still use a board like this, especially because of the lower power usage. Lower power usage means less heat to dissipate, and it means that your robot's battery will last longer. For a robot that is mobile and is battery supported, you really need to be careful when you're designing the compute that you use with it. And the smaller you can go, the better, so long as it can run your intelligent application. So with that, I've prepared a quick demo on the X5 that I have here. So I'm just going to stop that screen share. And then this is the X5 board that I have, and I'm running it with a stereo camera. So I wanted to show a couple of vision models that can be run on the board so you can get an idea of the kind of performance and speed that are available from that. So if I run the first node and then I need to refresh this and share the screen. Okay, here we go. That's hopefully coming through by now. So this is running the YOLO 12 model, and you can see there's a couple of objects I've got out on my table. That's not a great demo because I don't have a lot of objects available, but you can see that the scissors are being classified usually as scissors, but if they're slightly obscured, that could be a mouse, it could be an apple. I saw it flash up as. But you can see that a board this size is able to run YOLO continuously and smoothly with very little delay. So that's the kind of capability that we can see. And to show you a bit more, I've prepared a few images, which is slightly cheating, but let me see if I can move this over. Excuse me. Here we go. So some images that it's capable of recognizing is a donut. We've got broccoli, it's able to recognize, and you can see around it, it's classifying my monitor as a bowl. It can recognize pizza or an oven, apparently. And then it can also do smaller objects. So if I pull it in a bit, it's got bird, cat, the laptop slightly covered by me, unfortunately. The dog, there's scissors again, and refrigerator is again slightly covered. So not a great demo there. Moving on to the next slide, it doesn't recognize very much. And this is kind of the flaw in vision models that we have today, is that they're not very generalizable. If you want to add objects in that the model can recognize, you tend to need to get more data and retrain the model. So that's all I'll say on that. And I'll kick off the other demo, which is the stereo vision model. So this model uses each lens and uses a neural network running on the AI chip on board. So that's what's special about this board is that it's similar to a Raspberry Pi but has a dedicated chip for AI operations and it can run things like this. So the latency is hard to show on camera. The latency is slightly higher. If I tilt it up and down on camera, you can see there's a few seconds delay before it works. That might be because I haven't set up the board with full performance scaling, but this still gives you an idea. And then it's estimating across a number of pixels on the grid the kind of depth that we're seeing. So you at the moment you're seeing the depth to the wall, but if I hold my hand up in front of it, you can see that the distance gets smaller as I pull my hand in. So that's showing quite a high frame rate with also fairly high latency. But you can imagine that for a robot application, as long as it's not running along full tilt, this is pretty much fast enough for it to work. So let me stop the share of that and return to the presentation. So the purpose of that demonstration was to show what even a small board like the RDK X5 is capable of. What it's not capable of at the moment is running larger models such as LLMs. I believe the company is bringing out more boards with more powerful capabilities, but at the moment, vision models are pretty good. Audio processing models are pretty good, but when we start to get to larger models, that's when compute limits start to play a hard limit in what the robot is capable of doing. So if you want a small robot that is also intelligent, we are limited. Onto AI capabilities. So here's, I've got them grouped into perception, planning, and manipulation. So for perception, object recognition, as I was saying, if it doesn't already know what the object is, you probably need to retrain the model in order to figure out what the object is. I'm not actually sure how Helix put away groceries that it didn't identify. There might be some AI models I'm not aware of there. Sensor fusion, again, so I have said that state of the art is that we're starting to do sensor fusion. Sensor fusion is difficult, especially when you've got objects like clear objects where RGB and LiDAR don't work too well. For a robot to be able to perceive its environment well, we still have work to do. For planning, an understanding of physics is a big part of what's missing, in my view. So, modeling changes to the world. We can see the robot is taking a box off the top of the stack here. Would it know that if it took a box off the bottom, that the boxes would all tumble over? At present, probably not. And similarly, safety of its actions. So you can see robots doing soldering work within this enclosure. What happens when we have humanoids in our home? Maybe they're cooking a meal and they've got hot oil in a pan. Do they understand that moving the pan quickly risks spraying hot oil everywhere? This is something that we need to see going forwards, an understanding of the physics of the world. And manipulation. So tool use, generally with tools, robots need to be told in advance how the tools work. So a CAD model of the tool and routines that show how to use the tool, or some kind of reinforcement learning. Robots are limited in their ability to pick up a tool and use it. If we can make this better, we can start to have robots operating tools inside the house, like the robot cooking with the hot pan of oil. And again, complex objects. So the drawer example again, if it pushes it at slightly the wrong angle, then it might not understand how to correct that. And that's just one example. There's lots of objects in the house where you need some degree of understanding of what it is in order to manipulate it correctly. Here's some other improvements that don't fall into one of my three categories. But if we're able to reduce the number of repetitions in order to learn something, again, I keep referring to Jaifei's talk, but it overlapped. So thank you, Jaifei. Um, After the base model was trained, it took around 30 repetitions to get it to learn a new action, which is great. That's the kind of improvement that we'd like to see. So 30 repetitions is really good. Can we get that down? Can we do it without a base model that has been trained or on more different actions? Sim to real gap. Although we are able to train in simulation and run it on a real robot, there's still issues with that. It doesn't work quite as well as we'd like. And the more accurate that we can get that, the better able we'll be to learn or to teach robots in simulation and move it to real life. And explainability. So, why did a robot take the action? And for things like VLAs, that's more of an issue because the AI is controlling the entire robot. We can't see how the data went from the camera through to an action very well. So where the road leads, I'm going to skim over this section very quickly because it's mostly just speculation on my part. This is what I consider to be the potential near future of intelligent robots, if we can see improvements in those areas. So a humanoid in the house performing tasks, which I would love to see. I'd love to have a robot put my laundry on. Um, and autonomous delivery robots, which we're already starting to see. And in the same vein, autonomous driving cars. These are things that we are actively developing and seem to have a good handle on. Further improvements to AI will make those more of an everyday occurrence. Teaching and learning robots. So we have some amount of imitation learning already. If we make that more advanced, then robots could learn better from humans and even teach humans. So maybe a teacher in a classroom. Autonomous surgeries. So we do have surgical robots, which are great for helping surgeons, but we, to my knowledge, don't have fully autonomous operations yet. So I think at some point in the future, we'll start to see operations completely autonomously performed by robots. Exoskeletons to help move heavy loads around. I think this is self-explanatory. And farming robots that would help to identify ripe crops, pick them, bring them in, even replant crops or decide what crops go where. This is the kind of capabilities that I think we can see. Search and rescue robots. So this is mostly limited, I think, by the understanding of physics in the world, because operating in an unknown environment where a door is on top of the person you're trying to rescue, it's much better if the robot can understand that that's how that works. And robots in space, so we could start to see more autonomous operations from there, more autonomous exploration, more science experiments, maybe even start to construct in space. Speaking of construction, we should start to see soon, I think, robots starting to construct our buildings. We're already starting to see the prototypes and startups of that, and I think as intelligence improves, we'll see that more in the near future. And finally, social robots. So for the elderly and for the young, robots that are able to play with them and interact more and inspire emotional responses. I'm not sure inspire is the right word there, but we should start to see these kind of robots soon. So that's the current state of AI in robotics, in perception planning and manipulation, and what I would hope to see in the near future. Does anyone have any questions?